Hello again, YouTube pipe smokers and the YTPC. Southern Piper here. Want to start off by thanking my subscribers. I really do appreciate the relationships I'm building, getting to know a lot of you guys and ladies. So thank you. I've been wanting to do this video for a while, and I am going to do a review of Cornell and Diehl's Tuskegee Airmen. And the reason that this is particularly meaningful for me is kind of multifaceted. So I grew up in Alabama, live here now. I was also in the Air Force. And so that's two connections with the Tuskegee Airmen that I have. And so I've been wanting to do this for a while. So I've done a little research, tried to kind of plan out what I wanted to discuss. So obviously I'm smoking Tuskegee Airmen, and I'm smoking in my being's favorite. So I'm going to jump into the review, and then I want to give a little bit of history on the Tuskegee Airmen for anyone who may not know who they are, what they did, why they're significant in the history of our country. So to start off with, the 10 description, it says Cornell and Diehl salutes America's first black military aviators, the Tuskegee Airmen. The vibrant colors of their P-51s and their heroism earned them the nickname Red Tail Angels. From the bomber crews they escorted into battle, they got the nickname Red Tail Angels from the bomber crews that they escorted into battle. This is a blend of Virginia's, Perique, Turkish, and Latakia, pressed to marry flavors, then sliced for easy packing. So this comes in a crumble cake. Now all I have left is just giblets. I do not have an image of the cake, but it's an easy crumble cake. It is not. You don't have to cut it if you don't want to. You can just pull it apart. But the 10 note for me, I get some grass and hay, and maybe some paper, if you will. I get a little bit of smokiness from the Latakia. It is not very pronounced to me, and then I get what I associate with like a seaweed, if that makes sense. So that's what I get on the 10 note. I think the room note is pleasant to tolerable. I do not find it offensive at all. Now, I will say that lady friend, Princess Truvy, she does not like the room note of any Latakia blends. So for what that's worth. All right. So, according to Tobacco Reviews, it has 3.4 stars. The contents are Latakia, Oriental, Turkish, Perique, and Virginia. It is medium in strength, which for me, I would give it more of a mild to medium than a medium. There is no flavoring. The taste, they say, is medium, and I would agree with that. I think the taste is medium. And the room note is pleasant to tolerable, which I agree with. So, as far as the tasting notes that I pick up, so I don't get a lot of the Latakia. It's there, but it's not in your face, if you will. What I pick up is kind of on the front end. I pick up a hay, a little bit of earthiness, almost like a maybe a topsoil, if that makes sense, and maybe a little bit of dried grass, which would lend to the hay. On the back end, I get a little bit of a floral note, and then maybe like some toastiness, like maybe dry cereal. And I do want to also say that, it may come as no surprise to you that I'm having a scotch with this. And so I will be the first to say that sometimes what I'm drinking, which is typically a scotch, will influence my palate. So you may not pick up what I pick up in this. But overall, I think this is a really good blend. It behaves well in the bowl. It has no bite. I would say that this is an all-day blend. It would be an all-day blend for me. And if I had to kind of give a description, I would say that it is bold yet refined, which for me is a wonderful tribute to a group of heroes that were the Tuskegee Airmen. But I would certainly recommend picking up a tin of this. Again, it is not heavily. I don't get a lot of Latakia in it. But it is a very enjoyable smoke. So you can take my recommendation for what it's worth. Again, I'm no expert. I'm no professional. It's just something I like. So a little bit of history on the Tuskegee Airmen. So prior to World War II, military units were still segregated in the U.S. You had obviously African American military members dating back to the Civil War, with the Buffalo Soldiers. You had all black regiments in the Union Army, but they were still, segregated. During World War I, there was an African American who applied to be a pilot in the Army Air Corps in its infancy and was denied. I do not remember the gentleman's name. he actually wound up fighting with the French during World War One, even though he was an American. So fast forward to the late 1930s, there was a petition to allow African American men to train for pilot training. This undergraduate training took place in Tuskegee, Alabama, at an airfield down there near the Tuskegee Institute, which had been established as a institution of higher learning. And so you had these men training to become pilots, and since you didn't have a lot of integration, not only did they train pilots, but they had to train mechanics, they had to train munitions specialists to load bombs and munitions onto the planes that they would be flying. So the Tuskegee Airmen actually goes beyond just pilots. It's also support personnel were Tuskegee Airmen. And so one of the fighter squadrons that would escort bombers, and I believe it was the 315th fighter squadron, they actually never lost a bomber in bombing raids when they would fly, and that's where the term red tail angels comes from. So you had extremely skilled pilots that did their job above and beyond, and so you might think, well, why were they called the red tail angels? Well, during World War II, the tail wings of planes would be painted for different units, and I've got a photo example of this, and I do not know what all of these are except one. So these, you can see a yellow, you can see a stripe, and then this is an all black one. This tail wing paint scheme is from a bombardier group that later became the 445th Airlift Wing, and that is significant to me because I used to be attached to that wing in the Air Medical Evacuation Squadron. And then here are some more examples. You can see a red, you can see a green, and a yellow. So depending on the unit, depended on the paint scheme, and they kind of came up with their own. Now here is a photo of a P-51 painted for the Tuskegee Airmen. And you can see that it is painted all red. So today, the tradition of having a paint scheme on the tail wing is still present. We now call them flashes. And so if you ever see an Air Force aircraft, the tail wing will have, and I don't know how big it is, probably 6 inches maybe, typically at the top or middle of the tail, it'll be a color scheme, and typically within the strip of paint, they'll have a saying, and I'll give you, for instance, the Minnesota Air National Guard is at Langley Air Force Base as a detachment, and they fly F-16s. They have their tail flash as a color scheme. Their nickname is the Happy Hooligans. So within that tail flash, it says Hooligans. Another example would be the 445th Airlift Wing out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which I'll reference back to this first picture I showed you. They now have the black, gray, and black scheme. It is horizontal now, but it says Wright-Pat within the tail flash. And so that tradition is carried on today. Different whether it be squadron or wing, has their own unique scheme there. So I said all that to say that the Tuskegee Airmen are still being honored today by the Alabama Air National Guard, who flies F-16s out of an airfield that's attached to the airport in Montgomery, Alabama. But they have on some of their planes a red. They've painted the entire tail red, but for combat purposes, the tail would be gray, except for this very top portion would be red, and it'll say Alabama within the flash there. But they do have several aircraft that have the entire tail painted red in honor of the Tuskegee Airmen. And so this is a legacy and a memory that many of us hope never fades, because these men were pioneers. They helped integrate the pilot ranks in the Air Force. They were certainly extremely talented pilots in what they did in protecting the bombers during bombing raids in World War II. And they certainly were heroes. They flew missions in North Africa. They flew missions in Europe. And so this is something that I think we as a nation, and really anyone who is a freedom-loving person, certainly should be grateful for the men of the Tuskegee Airmen. And so that is all I've got for you tonight, friends. I appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate all of my subscribers. And until next time, I bid you happy smoking and blessings to you and your family.